What's up, legends? We are back with the May stat dive for the AL Central. It's your Commissioner Bobby Ray here reviewing my keys to the season after a little bit more than a full month of play, as well as going through stats for each team in the Legends League. We're kicking off this AL Central dive with looking at looking at the chat here. Wouldn't mind a quick scroll through cupcake pitchers when you do their rosters very quickly. OFC. Did I skip the Cubs pitchers? Sorry, I can go back and do Cubs pitchers at the end of this if I remember. But I'm going to focus on the AL Central right now. So, reviewing the White Sox, their keys to the season were, number one, that the low leverage bullpen guys don't blow stellar starts. That was really worrying that some of these starting pitchers were going to pitch so well and that the White Sox lineup was going to put up such big numbers that you might get some of these less stellar bullpen guys coming in and just really blowing huge leads because the high leverage bullpen guys on this team are really good, and then I thought there was a pretty big gap down to some of the guys that could be liabilities, and that has ended up being a huge liability as we watch these games where the AI managers refuse to bring in your good relievers unless you have a small lead. So even in tie games or games where the Sox are down by one, you're still going to have these low leverage, what are supposed to be low leverage bullpen arms coming in and being trusted to get that job done. And that we will definitely have a look at how that is going and how that's affecting the White Sox season. The second key was them finding a proper leadoff hitter against left-handed pitchers. They've got a really, really solid leadoff guy against righties in Lou Brock, but his numbers against lefties are just so worrisome that I was wondering who was going to end up settling into that role. It's moved around a couple times, but it has settled on Ernie Banks, so we'll see how that is working out for the Sox. And then my third key was that this lineup core is as good as it looks, because you've got really big names like Mike Trout and Adrian Beltre and Jimmy Fox and Freddie Freeman, and there's just a lot of star power, and if they lived up to that billing, then this team was going to be a nightmare, and we will see how all of that has worked out so far. So on the bottom of this page, you see Ken Boyer, Maglio Ordonez, Mike Lieberthal, and Hideki Matsui, who haven't gotten too many at-bats. I'll try to sneak down here every once in a while to see, especially check in on Ken Boyer, but a lot of this stuff isn't even a sample that's worth looking at. I'm really going to be paying attention to the starters here more than anybody else. So nobody on this squad has eclipsed 10 home runs yet, Mike Trout leading the way with 9. But unlike some of these rosters we're seeing, it's not so much boom and bust, it's a lot more of consistent home runs up and down the lineup. You've got Fox with 7, Brock, the leadoff guy, against righties with 5, Freeman with 6, Banks with 6, Beltre with 5, Kinsler with 3, Ott with 4, Hartnett with 6. So getting good power production up and down the lineup is really encouraging. And then you're also seeing that homogeneity out of the runs scored. So from the starting lineup, it looks like the lowest number of runs scored is 14 and the highest is 21. Everybody's really tightly grouped in there. And there's a little bit more of a discrepancy there with RBIs. Adrian Beltre really trailing the pack with only 7 RBI in his 123 at-bats. Whereas you've got Jimmy Fox leading the way with 23 RBI and Mike Trout with 22. 8 steals for Lou Brock, even though he's only lead off in one side of the platoon. That's really, really good high rate stealing there. Ian Kinsler with 5 is really encouraging, not something that I would have expected. And we'll go down here and have a peek at these guys. Ken Boyer added 2 home runs, and even the bench guys without much work have a home run apiece, so that's working out pretty well. The batting averages for the Sox don't look all that stellar. I think the slugging numbers are really, really encouraging, and these guys are still getting on base at a good clip, but the actual batting average isn't, and I wonder if that's responsible for some of the lower RBI totals compared to some of these other teams. So Jimmy Fox with a 252 average, Lou Brock hitting 295 is I believe, the highest on the team, outside of Gabby Hartnett, who's hitting 324. Come on. There's a value in the draft. I think he went probably somewhere close to around 20, maybe late teens. Not sure. Really, really impressive. But at the same time, with this batting average thing, you don't really see anybody struggling all that badly, except for maybe Ernie Banks at 236, or DJ LeMahieu with his 200. Ken Boyer down here hitting 364 in his 55 at-bats is really impressive. And then these on-base numbers. Everybody is on base at over a 300 clip outside of DJ LeMahieu, but I don't think he's actually in the starting lineup. Maybe he's a platoon guy. 315 from Fox, 316 from Brock, 368 from Freeman, making an argument for the top of the lineup there. Ernie Banks with a 302 on base, and as I was saying, he's being leaned on as the leadoff guy versus lefties, which is a little rough. 316 from Beltre, you'd like to see that higher. Mike Trout, 359. I would expect that to trend higher along with his batting average. He has 19 walks to his 24 strikeouts, which is really, really encouraging. Trout and Hartnett, the only guys with OPSs over 900. Again, I really think those are being dragged down by batting averages as everybody on this team is hitting for power. Boy, Ken Boyer's really trying to get into the middle of this lineup. His OPS is 1026. Not bad. The last video I did ended up going a little bit long, so I'm going to try to haul through these remaining videos a little bit quicker today. Lou Brock with 3 triples. His speed is just proving to be an absolute terror. We'll have a look at his platoon splits to see if he's worth hitting against lefties. Grounded into double play numbers aren't too terrible. Freeman, the unluckiest of the bunch, grounding into 5. Mel Ott has been intentionally walked twice. Lou Brock only been caught stealing once for a 889 stolen base percentage, which is quite good. Mike Trout has been caught twice for a 600 percentage. Looking at the defense, couple errors from a bunch of guys on this squad. You don't like to see 2 errors from your shortstop, your third baseman, your center fielder, and your left fielder, and your second baseman. These are really good defenders. I don't see that continuing. Beltre should have had better defensive stats. I should have fixed that right off the gate. He should be one of the best defensive third basemen in the game. But that's for the next iteration of the Legends League, when we make this thing even better. Mike Trout racking up 1.4 WAR, second on the team only to Gabby Hartnett. DJ LeMahieu has the bad distinction of a negative win above replacement at this point in the season. But I guess a replacement player in the Legends League is still a Hall of Fame tier player. 13% walk rate for Mike Trout against a 16.4% strikeout rate. That's really, really good peripheral numbers there. Everybody's ISO is respectable to great. A lot of these weird arcane sabermetric numbers that I'm just not all that familiar with. Don't know how much we can read into range factor here. It seems that a range factor over 2 for outfield is good. So Lou Brock with a 177 kind of worrisome. His fielding stat being 7-1 might be leading him to take bad routes to balls or something like that. And then on the other hand, you've got Mike Trout with a 266 range factor in the outfield, showing that he's covering a lot of ground in center. On to the platoon splits. Jimmy Fox really, really not doing too well against righties, which isn't backed up by his attribute profile. Would expect that one to regress in the upwards direction. Lou Brock crushing it versus righties, doing fantastically in his leadoff role against righties. Freddie Freeman 316 against right-handers. And Ernie Banks proving that he shouldn't be high in the lineup against righties with a 224 average. Let's peek him against lefties real quick. 276. Okay, so he may be the answer there at leadoff for the Sox. Nothing else really jumping off the page to me here except Mel Ott with 228 isn't great against righties, which you're seeing a lot more righty at-bats than lefty at-bats so far in the Legends League. Lou Brock hitting 091 versus lefty, but that's only been in 11 at-bats. And then Jimmy Fox hitting 412 against lefties. Again, only 17 at-bats, so it's not too much to read into, and he doesn't really have the speed to occupy the traditional leadoff role, but you got to wonder if he might be the answer to some of your ills, especially since this whole lineup is full of run producers. You don't necessarily need Fox as a guy in the 3 or 4 hole. He might be one of those unconventional Anthony Rizzo type leadoff hitters that ends up being really effective despite not fitting the traditional mold. I'm super into that kind of strategy in this game. I don't know how the White Sox will end up rolling with that, but it'll be interesting to see. I know they've been tinkering with their lineup a good amount. Mike Trout really not doing too well against lefties. His stats are a little bit lower against that side of the platoon, which doesn't make too much sense to me. Gabby Hartnett crushing it against southpaws. That's cool. Ken Boyer, equal batting average on both sides of the platoon. Go figure. Home and away splits, which I do not read too much into in this game. I don't know how much park factors are taken into account. And the fact that the Rockies are not putting up many runs home or away makes me think that there's not too much park factor actually accounted for in the show. But I'll just hover over these for a quick second. Freddie Freeman, Raking on the Road. Raking on the Road's a good baseball song title. And then one of the big peripherals that I'm really interested in is average with runners in scoring position. Ooh, maybe my thought about Jimmy Fox as a leadoff guy isn't corroborated by him having a 345 average with runners in scoring position, meaning you want him up when there's guys on base. In a way that Freddie Freeman has not been performing. 40 at-bats with runners in scoring position leads the team, and he's only hitting 225 in those opportunities. Definitely worrisome. Beltre hitting 172 in his opportunities to drive in runs, and that is reflected in his 7 RBI on the season, which is trailing the team by a long shot. Mike Trout, very clutch in those situations, 323 in 31 at-bats. And Mel Ott not getting it done in his opportunities either. DJ LeMahieu, for all the other scars on his season, a 429 average in his 7 at-bats with runners in scoring position is encouraging. He has more at-bat or more RBI than Adrian Beltre. Ain't that funny? Cool, looking at the pitchers for the Sox. Steve Carlton has been majestic as the ace with a 2.78 ERA, 57 Ks in 55 innings, and he's looked really solid every time I've watched him on the stream. Old Pete Alexander has also been looking really good on the stream when I've watched him. Maybe I've missed a couple bad innings, but he's got a 6.15 ERA in 41 innings with 41 Ks. The 1.39 WHIP isn't that bad, especially with a 6.15 ERA. So I'm interested to see how that plays out. Gaylord Perry's been great. Tom Glavine's been great. Kevin Brown's been okay. 5.22 ERA isn't great. 0-4. Yeah, maybe not so much. 18 walks from Gaylord Perry is concerning, but his whip is down at 1.24, so he's limiting the hits. And Pete Alexander is striking out a whole ton of batters, so that's encouraging. And then how about these low leverage guys like we were talking about in the Keys? Tim Hudson with a 4.08 ERA is really respectable for where we are in this season. A 6.16 ERA from Ed Cicotti, though, is not going to get the job done. Roy Face, a new addition, has had some frustrating appearances on the stream, but he's got his ERA at 4.32. Dave Righetti, really solid. 14 innings of 2.51 ERA work with 13 strikeouts to only 5 walks. Really solid for Righetti. Bruce Sutter, one of the guys who's been relied on to be a big piece for this bullpen. 8.2 innings of 6.23 ERA ball, 1.62 WHIP. We'll look at some of the peripherals on him to see if there's something to be concerned about there. And then Gagne has 1 blown save to his 7 saves, so he's 7 for 8. Hasn't had as many save opportunities as some of these other teams. And Brad Hand has only gotten into the game for 2 innings. One of those was a save, and one of those was a loss. So flip a coin. That's what you get from Brad Hand. Don't give him the left hand, give him the Brad Hand. Having a look at ERAs and whips here. Tom Glavine's whip of 1.17 is just sparkling. Roy Face's at 1.2 is great, and Righetti at 1.12 also very, very solid. I love looking at these quality starts to games started numbers. Pete Alexander trailing the team, only 3 quality starts in his 7 starts, so 4 of his 7 starts have been rough outings. Whereas on the other hand, you've got Gaylord Perry turning in 6 quality starts out of his 7 starts, so that's really reliable. He's given the team a chance to win every time he takes the mound. Steve Carlton, 6 quality starts out of his 8 appearances, leading to a 3-4 record, so he must not be getting much run support. I don't think run support is accounted for in this game, but that would be interesting to see. Tom Glavine, 2 shutouts already in the young season. Quite impressive. Dave Righetti's got 3 holds. Bruce Sutter's got 5. So he's only pitched 8 2/3 innings, but he's already picked up 5 holds and 4 blown saves? What? What is wrong? That's wild. We'll keep an eye on Suter as we keep going through some of these peripherals here. Suter's only allowed 1 home run. Glavin's only allowed 3. And maybe this is... No. So Perry's allowed 7 home runs. Carlton's allowed 7 home runs. Alexander's allowed 7. Brown's allowed 6. Some of these pitchers have been able to pitch around some home runs, but it looks like Old Pete has gotten bit by them somehow more than the other guys. Maybe letting more runners on base by walking more guys. I don't know. Tough. Pitching stats always leave a lot more holes that you have to read into with some creativity rather than giving you the full picture like hitting stats often do. 1.1 WAR already racked up by both Steve Carlton and Tom Glavine is quite impressive. Any Ks per 9 over 9 is always really, really solid. So you've got Steve Carlton, Old Pete, and Tim Hudson striking out at least a batter per inning. Gaylord Perry really not doing so and walking a lot of guys. So his FIP, FIP sitting at 478, suggesting that Gaylord Perry's results have been a little bit better than his performance so far. And then Old Pete the other way around. He's got a 3.95 FIP against a 6.15 ERA. So that does suggest that he might be the unlucky. I'm losing my words here, but he's just had some bad luck this year. That would be the suggestion from that. Bruce Sutter with his 3.69 FIP would also suggest that he's just had some bad luck. Yeah, he's striking people out. He's walking people, but not so much that it's really, really a worry. Maybe it's just a small sample, and Suter over the course of the next month will have ironed that out, and we'll be talking about him as a bright spot on this White Sox team. That's entirely possible. Tim Hudson's 4.36 FIP is right in line with his 4.08 ERA. I think he's a more than acceptable piece of this bullpen. Cicotte is maybe the one guy I'm worried about in this bullpen. Everybody else looks like, while the results might not be there, the performance is. So I wouldn't be too worried about this bullpen at this point. Cool. Moving on to the Indians. Let's go ahead and start with their pitchers since we haven't started with any pitchers doing this so far yet. At the bottom of this page, we've got Darren O'Day, Brian Harvey, and Dellin Betances, who don't have too much work. Rob Dibble also with only 8.1 innings pitched. He has a save to his name already, though. But for the guys who have taken the bulk of the work, it's Johan Santana leading the way in innings pitched, his 4-4 record in 49 innings. He struck out 54 and walked 22, so some good, some bad. His ERA sitting at 5.29 isn't stellar. But the Indians' offense has been mashing so much that an ERA under 5 would be more than acceptable for giving the team a chance to win. Wilbur Wood, speaking of winning, is leading the team with 5 wins and only 2 losses. He's got a 4.37 ERA in 45 innings, proving that you don't have to have an ERA under 3 to win ball games, especially when your offense can mash like Cleveland's can. The closer, Joe Nathan, has 8 saves and no blown saves, so he's a perfect 8 for 8 and has pitched 10.2 innings. That suggests to me that he's getting some more than 3-out saves, which is pretty cool. Roy Halladay leading the starters with a 3.91 ERA, Billy O'Dell with a 3.46, and Rob Dibble with a 1.08 ERA and a .72 whip, one of the better bullpen arms we've seen so far. Have a peek at these bottom guys real quick. Dellin Betances, who was a guy I pointed to a lot in the divisional previews, is really showing up. He struck out 7 in his 3.2 innings. Hasn't lost a game. Has he blown a save? Has not blown a save. So he's been a weapon out of this bullpen that they haven't had to rely on a bunch. But when they've called on him, he's really answered the call, and that's exactly what we were looking for him to do. Probably paid way too much attention to him for being such a fringe guy on this team. So the starting rotation has not turned in the quality starts like the White Sox rotation has. In the 8 games each pitched by the top 3 starters, Santana, Halladay, and Schilling, they each have 3, 4, and 4 quality starts. So not giving the team a chance to win every time. Oh, Wilbur Wood's a relief pitcher? And yet he's 4th on the team in innings. Okay. That's shocking. I mean, he's pitching fine. And he's vulturing wins from these pitchers, but if they're not going deep and limiting the runs and giving their team a chance to win, Here comes Wilbur Wood for the W. Only one complete game on this starting rotation, and that was a shutout by Halladay. We do have Rob Dibble turning in 8 holds in his 8.1 innings. He's been absolutely stellar. Love to see that from Dibble. 9 home runs allowed by Johan. He's really been bit by the long ball. Halladay and Wood each allowing 7 each. CC Sabathia seems to be limiting the home run ball, though, only allowing 3. Oswalt has only allowed 4, though in fewer innings pitched. CC racking up 1.2 WAR. The only Indians pitcher to even come close to 1. He has a 4.8 ERA and a 1.49 WHIP in 45 innings with 44 Ks and a 2-3 record. I don't know how pitcher WAR is calculated, but there's CC Sabathia with a 1.2. Go figure. Only one starter striking out a batter per inning. That's Johan. Joe Nathan with his 11.81 Ks per 9 is really stellar, especially when paired with a 1.69 walks per 9. A really great performance by the highly valued closer in Cleveland. So it's like there's a few pitchers doing well, and then a kind of a gooey center, which is a little bit worrisome for the longevity of this team. But they recently catapulted to second place in the Central behind the Red Hot Tigers, so you really can't fault the Indians for what they're doing so far. On to the hitting. They recently cut ties with Jason Giambi, who has gone on a tear with his new team, the Dodgers. They picked up Adrian Gonzalez, who a lot of his numbers are going to come from his time on the Mets, so don't read too far into a lot of that. And then we got Campaneris, Collins, and Sundberg down here with not enough at-bats to really look too much into. We'll stick to the starters for this team. 10 home runs from Josh Gibson leading the way. We're seeing a lot of the highly drafted catchers really struggling so far, but Josh Gibson was a first-round catcher, I believe the first catcher taken off the board, and he has 10 home runs and is absolutely shellacking the ball to a 345 average in 116 at-bats. Rogers Hornsby has touched the plate 37 times, which is got to be close to the lead in the MLB. That's pretty darn impressive. He has 9 home runs for himself. Frank Robinson also adding 9. And Josh Hamilton with 9. This team is mashing. RBI leaders are Frank Robinson with 30, Gibson with 27. A lot of run production up and down the lineup. Nobody really dragging their feet in the run production department except for David Wright and Josh Hamilton. You'd maybe like to see more RBIs from those guys. We'll look at their runners in scoring position numbers later. 6 steals from Frank Robinson. A lot of activity on the base paths by this roster. I'd be interested to see the stealing rates and the caught stealing here in a sec. Looking at the averages, specifically the on-base percentage, Rogers Hornsby belonging at the top of that lineup with a 394 OBP. Gonzo with his 346. Again, that's mostly with the Mets when he was in a different role, so don't want to read too much into that one. Frank Robinson on base at a 342 clip. I believe he's down in either the 5 or the 6 hole for this team. He might be arguing for a higher role. Ed Delahanty, one of my favorite guys that I didn't know of before this whole Legends League experience. He's on base at a 374 clip, though he's got the icicle next to his name, so he must be on a slump. How about Josh Gibson with almost 450 on base? Take a walk, Josh Gibson. 22 walks and 21 strikeouts. Coming from the catcher position, I bet his wins above replacement is just astronomical. 1130 in the OPS department. On the bench, Jim Sundberg, only 25 at-bats, but his OBP is 444. So he might be arguing for a bit more playing time. 10 doubles from Gonzo coming over from the Mets. 9 for Hornsby, 9 for Robinson, 8 for David Wright. Wow, a lot of triples. This is the most triples I've seen from a roster. 3 from Omar, 3 from Hornsby, 2 from Brothers. Delahanty, Gibson, and Hamilton adding triples of their own. 8 double plays grounded into by Dan Brothers. Is that unlucky, or is at this point is that a skill? And by skill I mean lack of skill. On the other hand, Ed Delahanty only grounded into 1. Josh Gibson's been intentionally walked twice. Four errors from Hornsby at the Keystone is a little bit worrisome. especially when you got 2 from Omar and 2 from Brothers. Something to keep an eye on as the season progresses. Oh, did I skip over caught stealing? I did. Not too many caught stealing numbers. So these guys are really stealing at a good clip, both in quantity and in quality. So really, really good. This team is bashing the ball and running all over the base paths. It is just an offense to be feared. 1.6 WAR from Hornsby, 2.9 from Gibson. He's almost racked up 3 wins above replacement by himself so far. That's ridiculous. We're gonna see some regression from Gibson before long. That just has to happen. .280 ISO from Hornsby, 269 from Robinson, 336 from Gibson, 311 from Josh Hamilton. This team just mashes, absolutely mashes. Some more of these arcane sabermetric stats. I'll just hover over them for a second because I don't know what they mean. I don't know. Range factor, we've been seeing that anything over 2 for outfield seems to suggest that's good. Josh Hamilton, surprisingly good range factor, even though he's been tasked with running around in center field. Platoon splits here versus lefties and righties. Adrian Gonzalez not hitting well against righties on the season. Hornsby with a 275 average, so he must be doing better against lefties. Frank Robinson is at 306 against righties. Delahanty 306 as well. David Wright 304. Josh Gibson's hitting 408 against righties. Not too bad. And against lefties, I actually have to go and take a phone call, so I'm going to put my mic on mute and do that, and I'm just going to keep scrolling through these numbers, stop on them for a few seconds each. And you can make your own analysis. Alrighty, sorry for the interruption there. We are back with the Tigers, who are the absolute class of the Legends League so far, to everybody's chagrin except for the Tigers management. The 3 keys to them, when I was running through them at the beginning of the season, when I was also planting my flag as them being my favorite team and my pick for the World Series, was number 1, they've got to hit a lot of dingers. I thought that 200 was the floor for this team, and it looks like they are well on pace to shatter that. The second was that their bench weapons be used well, though with as well as the starting lineup is playing, I don't know that that's going to matter much. And then for the pitching, it was to avoid the big inning through 7 innings. I just realized that I did not give you my keys for the Indians, so let's just retrace and go through that real quick. Key number 1 for the Indians. Stay consistent, aka no streaks. Well, the Indians have been the opposite of that so far. They started off with one of the coldest streaks in the Legends League and then went on the absolute hottest streak in the Legends League. And the result is a second place position after the world-beating Tigers. So maybe they can end up being streaky, because when they get hot, they seem to be the hottest team in the damn league. So I guess that key might end up being erased before long, though that streakiness might end up being their undoing. So I'm going to keep an eye on that one as the season goes. The second key was for their pitchers to keep the ball on the ground, because I think that they have a home run problem. That was something I identified early, and let's have a look at these home runs. Yeah, a lot of home runs allowed by this starting rotation. So they are not doing a great job of keeping the ball on the ground and trusting their defense. And then I had one of CC, Johan, or Schilling becoming a strikeout monster so that they could really become a playoff rotation. And it looks like Johan Santana has stepped up into that role. 54 strikeouts in 49 innings. I think that counts as strikeout monster. You would hope to see CC and Schilling right on the heels, but it doesn't look like they are quite stepping up. Though one big strikeout outing from those guys could really turn that around. Alrighty, back to the Tigers. Looking first at those bench weapons. Sorting by at-bats. So Trey Turner, Jason Varitek, Scott Rowland, and Bernie Williams haven't gotten much run. Not a lot of at-bats, like what we're seeing with a lot of teams here. The AI management is not putting these bench guys in very much. I think that's okay. The bench weapons haven't been needed for Detroit, clearly, and they're one of the deepest teams in the league, but it looks like they're one of the teams who needs depth the least, so go figure. And let's have a look at these dinger numbers. JD Martinez with 12, Yelich with 11, Mantle with 11, Matthews with 9, Canseco's got 7, even Scott Rowland's got 4, and Turner's got 3 in 40 at-bats each. What? Scott Rowland's hitting a home run every 10 at-bats. That's like Mark McGwire level. And then even Robin Yount's got 4, Joey Votto's got 7. This whole lineup is just cranking home runs. It's just insane. You look at the average box score, and it's got like they've got 5 or 6 home runs. RBI production, thing I mentioned time and time again that I'm really looking at this point in the season to figure out lineup order. JD Martinez has got 35 RBIs. I believe that's one of the leaders in all of MLB. Mickey Mantle with 31 is right behind him. Eddie Matthews with 28. Christian Yelich with 25. All of those guys. And Robinson Cano with 27. So there you've got 5 guys who you can really rely on to just be driving runs in. If you could put a couple high OBP guys in front of them, which I think the Tigers have already done, that might be why this lineup is clicking so hard. A surprising amount of speed from Jose Canseco, stealing 6 bases. Mickey Mantle swiped 5. Go figure. Looking at OBP, Joey Votto with a 408 on base percentage is absolutely elite. How many runs has he plated so far? 27 runs scored is solid, but not amazing. You would expect him to be driven in more. Maybe the lack of speed there is not turning that high on base percentage into an elite runs scored total. But the on base numbers from this whole lineup are crazy. 325 from Robin Yount is low for this lineup. JD's got 375, as we said, Votto with 408, Yelich with 354, and that's after a really big cold streak that he's been on, though he's finally climbed himself out of that. Mickey Mantle on base at 403 clip, Eddie Matthews at 420, Jose Canseco at 350, Robinson Cano at 391. It's just exhausting. Jorge Posada at 384. This team just grinds out at bats, doesn't strike out a lot, and walks a ton. It is just a nightmare to play. 3 guys with OPSs over 1,000, 3 guys with OPSs in the 900s, and then you've got Canseco and Posada in the 8s. It just doesn't let up. Does not let up. Looks like JD has been the strikeout bugaboo here with 40 strikeouts. I guess Canseco even worse with the strikeout problem. 43 strikeouts to only 16 walks. But JD Martinez was the hitter of the month in the AL for April, so you're not too worried about those Ks. Even when they're not sending the ball over the wall, those doubles numbers are insane. 11 for JD, 14 for Mick, 10 for Eddie, and 10 for Cano. Nuts. Tons of triples, too. Ugh. Lions and Tigers and Bears, oh my. Mostly just the Tigers, though. Some grounded into double play numbers that are suggesting that maybe this team could even be scoring more. A lot of hit by pitches as pitchers get frustrated as these guys grind out really long at bats. Robin Yount's been caught stealing 3 times. He's the only guy who's really run into a lot of outs on the base paths. Looking at the defense, 2 errors from Posada behind the plate, but then only 1 error each from Yount, Votto, and Yelich. Mostly clean on the defensive side of the ball. So much wins above replacement. Robin Yount, the lowest in the starting lineup with .9, but then everybody else has cleared 1 already, and Mickey Mantle and Eddie Matthews have cleared 2. Ridiculous. Walk rates are a little lower than I expected, but when you're mashing this much, there's not as much time for walks. Grinding out long at bats doesn't always mean walking, and sometimes it means striking out. But that's okay. Tigers aren't going to argue with the results too much here. Look at those ISO numbers. I'm not even going to read them out. It's just disgusting. Disgustingly good, if that wasn't clear. The at-bats per home run numbers are crazy. Here's all these peripherals that I don't know what they mean. Mickey Mantle with that 243 range factor in center field is one of the best outfield range factors we've seen so far. Here's some platoon stuff. I'm not even going to look for the good numbers. I'm only going to look for the low numbers at that point, because the good numbers are the rule and the low numbers are the exception. Yeah, look at Yount slumming it with his 304 average versus righties. What a sucker. Even worse versus lefties, 182. I guess Yount has kind of been the disappointment on this roster, though he plays a really solid shortstop, so not to worry there. Man, really not as good results against lefties. Robinson Cano raking against lefties with a 392, Votto with a 315, but everybody else is under 300. Yelich struggling to a 220, JD only 283 against lefty. Yeah, only 283, but compared to what he's doing against righties, that's quite low. So just like the Cardinals, the two top teams in the Legends League, the Tigers might be a little bit susceptible to the left-handed starting pitcher. Here we've got home and away splits, which I keep saying I don't really care about in this game until I see some proof that they're actually reliable in any way, but I don't believe they are. Until then, we can just be amazed that Joey Votto is hitting .465 on the road. But I do care about runners in scoring position. In 42 at-bats with runners in scoring position, JD Martinez is hitting .452. Come on. I expected to see higher averages with runners in scoring position from the rest of this lineup as well. Cano is really proving to be one of the steals of the draft and one of the best players on this stacked Tigers lineup. He's hitting .357 in his 42 chances with runners in scoring position. But you've got the rest of the team kind of a little bit under 300, kind of circling around that 275 average with runners in scoring position. So more evidence that this team could be scoring even more runs than they are, which nobody needs that. At the bottom down here in the pitching, we've got Bobby Jenks, Zach Britton, and Ugueth Urbina, who have not put up too many innings. We'll be focusing on the guys who are. Trevor Hoffman has 12 save in his 15 innings. He's only walked 2 and struck out 17. No pitcher on this team has accrued more than 1 loss. And 4 pitchers have 5 wins. Sandy Koufax, Jose Fernandez, Fernando Valenzuela, and Jack McDowell with 5 apiece. Jack McDowell surprisingly leading the way with a 1.47 ERA, and that's out of a bullpen spot. So he might be one of the best performing long relievers in the game so far. 1.08 WHIP is really quite fantastic. He's appeared in 14 games, 30 innings. So it's not like that's a small sample. Struck out 25 against only 9 walks. That's all-star production there from Blackjack McDowell. 5.01 ERA from Steven Strasburg would look a lot better if it was 4.99, but you see that 5 and you get a little bit worried just in your gut. I did expect a little bit better ERA numbers from this rotation when you just look at them on paper, but again, only no pitcher has taken more than 1 loss, so you can't argue with the results. Solid WHIP numbers, maybe more encouraging WHIP numbers than you're getting in terms of ERA. Pop down here and see the guys who aren't pitching much. Zach Britton has yet to allow a run. Really solid WHIP. Bobby Jenks may be the one Jenks and Osuna are possibly the two weak links in this bullpen, or on this whole pitching staff for that matter. Quality starts against starts is a stat that I've been very interested in. Steven Strasburg in his 7 appearances has only turned up 3 quality starts, only equated to 1 loss though. Yeah, so each of these pitchers seems to have had a couple bad games and then has been solid in their other appearances. Only 1 complete game out of this roster that came from Walker Buehler, but with the kind of offense that these guys are putting up, you don't need too much in the way of complete game heroic efforts. 2 blown saves from Hoffman, 1 from Britton. That's surprising. Hoffman's been doing so well, 1.8 ERA, .87 WHIP, and yet he's blown 2 saves. Those must have been, 1-run leads that he surrendered. What do we got in way of holds? 5 holds from Jenks and Britton, 3 from Myers. Interesting. I still think holds are a weird stat. Jose Fernandez has allowed 10 home runs in 52 innings, which is a little bit worrisome, as opposed to Jack McDowell, who's only allowed 1 in 30. .2 WAR already from Sandy Koufax, 1 from Fernando Valenzuela. Jack McDowell out of the bullpen already knocking on the door of 1 win above replacement, which is quite admirable. Ks per 9 numbers looking really, really great from this starting rotation. Everybody striking out at least 1 batter per inning. Strasburg 11.1 Ks per 9 and Jay Fern with 10.49 Ks per 9. Really, really quite good. Walker Buehler looks to have a bit of a walk problem so far, but he's the only one who's walking too many. FIPs suggest that we might be in for some rougher waters with these. No, never mind. Yeah, a couple of these guys. Well, I guess it's mixed messages. Some FIPs are higher than ERAs. Some are the other way around. So I'm not going to read too into that right now. Cool, and then we're briefly going to have a look at the cupcakes. Not going to spend a lot of time on these guys, just going to briefly fly through. Mike Soroka had been pretty solid for the Royals, but he seems to have fallen on tougher times. His rate stats have ballooned a bit. Negative WAR from 3 different pitchers on this Royals roster. And not encouraging in the way of FIP. Looking at the Royals position players sorted by at-bats. Eric Karros with 11 home runs. 7 steals from Willie Wilson. Really rough batting averages, though, up and down this Royals lineup, and their record certainly reflects it. 979 OPS from Eric Karros is quite solid. Playing first base for this Royals squad. Three errors from Justin Turner at third is surprising. .4 WAR from Willie Wilson already. Cool. So there's some bright spots in this lineup for the Royals. Maybe enough to work with to turn their season around in a meaningful way. And then looking at the Twins before we swing back to the Cubs, which I missed their pitching staff when we were looking at the NL Central, so we'll get them here in a second. Not too much power from this Twins lineup, but that was never going to be their calling card from the beginning of the season. Better batting average numbers, led by Ben Taylor with a 320 and Judy Johnson with a 294. A lot of doubles from the squad turning over the lineup. We know that the Twins can be a crunchy cupcake, as I think that's what somebody described them as to me in a text message recently. And you don't want to bite into a crunchy cupcake. Alrighty, circling back to the Cubs, I'm going to have to hang it up here in a second, so we're just going to go to the pitchers here, look very quickly at the Cubs pitching staff, and yep, I gotta go. I will be back in a little while with some more stats. Going to take a little break, but I will be back before too long. See y'all later.